She had the kind of smile that made people forgive everything easy, practiced. The kind that curved up at the corners and left no room for questions. I used to think it was an honest smile. It was the smile that met me at the door after long days. The smile that made our disagreements feel temporary. The night I discovered what it hid, that same smile looked like a mask I'd been living with for years. It started with a slip so small it felt absurd in hindsight. A lipstick-stained napkin tucked behind the cushions. A calendar reminder that didn't match any meeting she'd told me about. At first, I made excuses for her, because we are very good at making excuses for the people we love. But excuses have edges, and those edges sharpen when you start to look. I didn't want to be the person who tore through a life for the thrill of blood. I wanted certainty. So I watched, quiet as a shadow, cataloging details that would either confirm my fear or let me breathe again. She smiled through the watching, as carefree as ever. Sometimes she would kiss me unexpectedly in the kitchen and laugh about some coworker's joke. And I would return her affection because routine is a potent drug. Other times her phone would light with messages she kept tucked face down, and she'd cover it with a hand the way a gambler hides a losing card. The dissonance between the warmth of her smile and the secrecy of her actions felt like being in two rooms at once, one with light and one with a slow leak of cold. I told myself not to act on impulse. I learned to separate fury from strategy. There's a crude satisfaction in storming into a room, slamming evidence on a table, and watching the show of remorse or outrage that follows. But that's a cheap ending. I wanted an ending that left no room for reinterpretation, no chance for a practiced apology to smooth the lines. I wanted her smile to lose its power not through spectacle, but because the world could no longer sustain her fiction. So I gathered proof not for revenge's sake, but for the kind of clarity that can't be argued away. Receipts, timestamps, screenshots, the kind of mundane artifacts that make a story undeniable. I made copies. I backed them up. I documented patterns, the rhythm of late nights she called work, the way certain friends' names appeared when her voice changed to something softer. I did not become a different person. I became a meticulous archivist of truth. While I assembled evidence, I rebuilt myself. It's funny how hallucinations of betrayal sharpen the edges of ordinary life. Coffee tasted clearer in the morning. The gym felt less like punishment and more like reclamation. Friends noticed the change. I laughed more honestly, answered calls I'd been ignoring. Let small pleasures back into my life. That rebuilding was an important part of the plan. If you intend to expose someone, you owe it to yourself to do it from a place of composure, not wreckage. There were moments when I tested her little probes that told me how far the smile could stretch. A casual question about an errand, a note left where she would find it. A subtle shift in my routine. She adjusted, lied fluently, wrapped her falsehoods in the same easy warmth that had once convinced me of her honesty. Each time she smiled through it, her confidence grew. Confidence is dangerous for people who deceive. Hubris makes them sloppy. That sloppiness is where truth finds a way in. The night I decided to act, I planned for ordinary. I did not want a theatrical trap. I wanted a setting that would make her mistake look inevitable. I cooked the meal she always loved, set the table with our best dishes, and turned on the playlist we danced to in the early days when the world seemed smaller and kinder. The apartment smelled familiar in a way that made my chest ache and steady at the same time. When she arrived, she was radiant in that practiced way. Her smile was full and bright, and for a moment a part of me wanted to believe in it again. We ate. We talked about inconsequential things, work, a neighbor's dog, small talk that serves as a safe harbor for the truth. I let the conversation float, and then, as if circling ashore, guided it gently toward the facts I had assembled. I slid the folder across the table like a prop in a theater I'd been writing for weeks. Her smile wavered, a hairline crack at first, then a fissure. She laughed as if to dismiss it, but her fingers, those practiced hands, began to tremble. I read aloud, not with venom, but with the calm cadence of someone reciting a ledger. Dates, places, receipts, message snippets. Each plain fact landed and stayed. No drama, no screaming, just evidence that filled the room until the air felt different. She tried to perform the old moves. Deny, deflect, minimize. She accused me of intrusion, of paranoia, of finding patterns where none existed. Her smile returned as if summoned, brighter and more believing than any sincere expression I'd ever seen. But the ledger on the table was indifferent to charm. It did not care for rhetoric or performance. It was a simple mirror, and the reflection it showed was incontrovertible. The irony of it was brutal. She had used a smile to hide herself for so long that now the same smile was the last refuge she reached for. And it failed. People who deceive are often convinced their masks are impervious. They are surprised when the mask becomes brittle. Her attempts to rewrite the story were feeble beside the weight of the documents I'd kept. She reached for explanations that sounded rehearsed stress, a mistake, an affair that meant nothing, and I listened until the words exhausted themselves. When she finally stopped speaking, the room was a different place. The comfortable light of our home had turned clinical. Intimacy had been replaced by accountability. I felt neither triumph nor cruelty. The satisfaction I experienced was quieter. The satisfaction of not being gaslight into silence, of reclaiming my reality from someone who'd been living into. I didn't broadcast her secrets. There was no public spectacle, no social media massaging of truth into entertainment. Exposure in a public forum can feel like a blood sport, cheap and theatrical. My intent had never been to humiliate, but to end the fiction. So I gave her choices: leave and take responsibility, try to mend the things she'd broken honestly, or walk away into the life she had constructed without me. She begged. She apologized. She promised. Words, I realized, were the currency of someone who'd never intended to be accountable. She left that night with a suitcase and a smile that had a different light, smaller, less sure. I sat in the kitchen long after the door closed, the playlist still humming, the scent of rosemary and roast heavy in the air. The folder remained unopened on the table, its job done. The evidence wasn't a weapon I wielded. It was a boundary I set. The truth doesn't need to be shouted. It only needs to be placed where it can't be ignored. In the months that followed, life rearranged itself in quieter rhythms. I moved through mornings with a steadier heart, rebuilt relationships frayed by duty to someone else, and let myself be seen without the filter of her smile. She, I learned in time, did not thrive in the absence of the persona she'd worn. The people who'd been fooled by that smile, friends, acquaintances, began to notice the discrepancy between charm and character. Some drifted away. Others reached out to understand. The smile that had once opened doors for her lost some of its power, because the world had new information to weigh it against. Revenge, as it turned out, had a different face than I once imagined. It was not public shaming, nor vindictive cruelty. It was the reclaiming of truth, the refusal to be erased by deceit, and the quiet realignment of a life that deserved honesty. She had smiled while cheating. I smiled while exposing her, but mine was the smile of someone who had earned clarity, not the smile of someone who enjoyed another's fall. Sometimes I still catch myself tracing the arc of that old smile in a photograph, and feeling estranged. Small sorrow, less for the loss of what was, more for the loss of potential. Smiles can be beautiful things. They can also be very good lies. The lesson I carried forward was simple. Treat smiles as you would any other evidence: beautiful, yes, but never a substitute for truth.